I think for anybody in training, build and maintain those relationships with the people that you're in training with, or the people that you're seeing who are going into PM&R you kind of know about virtually now that it's virtual interviewing, because like those are going to be your colleagues, and like those are also people that you can reach out to. So I think, just knowing that it's okay to struggle, but also knowing that there's help out there, and it's really hard to ask for help. But I think pretty much all of us in the field, if asked, are going to do what we can to help, because it's a small field. And if we help somebody achieve what they need to do, the field's going to be better for it.
Welcome to The Summary, a podcast from Mary Free Bed, where we explore physical medicine and rehabilitation, one topic at a time. Together, we will gain insights, discover innovations, and deep dive into the latest developments in the field.
Well, Doug, today we have really two special guests. I mean, how often do you actually get to have two program directors representing the state of Michigan sitting together on a podcast? Pretty awesome.
It'd be great to have different perspectives on what it means to be a program director, not just for PM&R residencies, but I think for all residencies, a lot of similar issues. So we appreciate you guys being on here. Tons of experience with Mike, being over 30 years as a program director.
The longest standing program director in history.
The world record.
Yes.
Yep. And Adam is program director here at Mary Free Bed for several years now. And I see him every day, and I see kind of the work and the passion he puts into that program. And, I see here the happiest residents I've seen in 30 years. So we'd like to get your thoughts. I guess my first question is, why were you guys interested in teaching residents and specifically being program director? Adam?
Yeah, I think my passion for academic medicine really started when I was a resident myself, and kind of was inspired by those who taught me the field, and really brought for me a passion for not just taking care of patients, but for also instilling and passing along that knowledge to the next generation. So for me, when I was a chief resident, I really tried to dive deep into not just the academic teaching aspects of it, but kind of the program management, getting involved in the GME committee side of things, getting involved in curriculum development, curriculum management, assessment and evaluation. And that was really kind of my first foray in, was my chief resident year, and kind of never really looked back. I knew from that point on that was something that was always kind of a career goal for me. Speaking candidly, I think the opportunity arose a little bit sooner than I was maybe expecting in my, when I kind of lay out my 5 or 10 year academic physiatrist career plan. I think it was a little sooner than I expected, but I think it came at the right time for me. I was really able to both kind of learn Mary Free Bed, but also kind of learn how do you integrate that aspect of kind of your professional side into the day-to-day. I think it was just always kind of part of my schedule that was kind of built in for me. And so I didn't really know anything different. And I think that was actually a really helpful thing for me.
I mean, you were definitely at the right timing, I would say, because he was my awesome associate program director. So I would be like, yeah, for sure. Mike, was it the same for you 30 years ago?
Boy, I don't have a great answer to that, because I always wanted to teach, and I thought I would go to a program and just, be a teacher. And I hadn't really thought, do I really want to be a PD or not? It didn't matter that much to me. And so when I was looking at residencies coming out of my residency and fellowship, I was, I ended up going to Michigan State for multiple reasons. And we didn't have a residency, but they said, well, if you want to start one, you can. I said, well, okay. I was teaching students already, but I figured that probably that's what I would do. So it kind of just landed in my lap, and I ended up doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you're transitioning into becoming the associate program director.
Yes.
How did you land on that decision?
Well, that's, again, when you try to look it up in the book, there's no real good way to do it, so AI said.
You asked ChatGPT.
I had seen other people who had transitioned from other programs. I don't know how many I've seen, but maybe 20, 25 people. And the one, some people just quit and they crack up, or they get sick of it and they quit. But the ones that I liked were the people that had a plan, to transition it. And so the ones that seemed to do the best to me were the people that said, all right, I have my PD, the new PD, and then I will be the APD, Associate Program Director, for some period of time, help them get through it. So at least for one cycle of interviews and residents and all the, garbage that we have to do to try to at least get them through the 42 websites and blah, blah, blah.
What's the biggest garbage now that you mentioned that?
Yeah.
The biggest, I will say, being an old PD, the rules have changed so much. I feel like the frog in the boiling water. And that over the years, I've just had every year it's more and more and more. And I'm like, all right, it's time to jump, I guess is kind of how it is. But, you need some, in my mind, I wanted some way to do it and to leave the program in pretty good hands. So I feel like I can do that. If I got somebody else who wants to be the APD next year, then I will step down. I got no problem with that. But trying to get somebody who really wants to be the PD is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Takes a special breed.
Yeah, there's a reason why the average length of time is 5 or 6 years.
Oh, I didn't know that. As a PD, it's like 5 to 6 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think PM&R is on a little bit of the longer side when you look at program directors for other specialties, but it is a really challenging role, and I think the burnout of program directors is a really really real factor in what we do. When I was talking with some of my mentors and one of my program director, right, one of the things that you kind of see and when you're in the role you really experience is there's a lot of pressures coming from both sides, and you're really, it's not a middle management position, but in some ways it kind of feels that way, that you're kind of in between the decisions that the health system is potentially making, the decisions that either your medical group or your department are making, and then there's how does that impact your trainees and what do they want? And you're trying to kind of navigate on both sides. And so, sometimes it kind of feels like you're trying to negotiate between different sides and kind of decide who wins, who loses, and who wins by X amount, who loses by X amount. And that's a really tough balance to strike. And I think the really good program directors carry a lot of that weight with them, and I think the really good ones carry that so that their residents can focus on learning the medicine instead of having to learn and navigate the politics of whatever system they're in. But that is a heavy yoke to bear at times for program directors.
Yeah, for sure. And then you kind of hear the residents will tell me something, and I'll hear the story from them, and so I'll go talk to the attending, and it's a different story. Like, well, dang, really?
Like, what happened
Funny
there?
how they left that out.
Yep.
It's always the minor details.
Yeah, right,
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it's one of those where you really have to get to the truth of what happened. There's a lot of times and it goes both ways. There's what the resident said, there's what the faculty said, and then there's kind of what happened. And the what happened is almost always in the middle, and sometimes it's closer to one than the other. And I think that one of the things that I've really come to know in this job is you need to figure that out before you act. I think there's kind of this feeling in medicine of like, we need to act, we need to take quick action, we have a lab result, we need to do something, there's a change in patient status, we need to do something. In residency program, that quick reaction can sometimes be the tip of the sword. And that spending a little bit of time to figure out what actually happened or is happening before you act makes all the difference in the world, I think.
I totally agree. The other thing I like to do is say, all right, what if we did this? And then I put the proposal in front of the resident and or the attending, and almost always I change my mind. Almost always they'll say, well, that's good, accept. Or,
Got it.
so almost always my first solution is not the final solution.
So you ask them the solution, and
Yeah.
then they'll say, actually, that doesn't work because X, Y, Z.
Or this part will work or that part won't. And then sometimes in my mind, you really have to come down to a conflict and you got to pick one or the other. And then you want to explain it to the other people. So
It's almost like being a parent in some
That's
ways.
what I was just
Like a
thinking.
skillful parent.
yeah, I'm not very good at that.
That's what we've heard.
Yeah, because your daughter is actually one of our chief residents here.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Michelle.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Happy to have her, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of guidelines now, or as we've called it, junk, with how to do this. Adam, I'm curious, do you feel like it's helpful to have that as a roadmap, or it's like you want it out of the way and do what you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I would say that, I come from a perspective of I don't really know anything different. When I went through as a resident, chief resident, and now as a program director, there have always kind of been rather tight guidelines from an accreditation perspective, and I think from where I sit, I think a lot of it is helpful in that it ensures that there's kind of a baseline. I don't even call it a minimum because I think it's actually above the bare minimum, but there's a kind of baseline level of support and structure that needs to exist within a health system that's going to take on a residency program. Same for a department or a medical group that's going to sponsor a residency program in and of itself. And I think that also comes with kind of a minimum amount of resources in terms of program director time, program coordinator time, faculty protected academic time. So I think there are some really good things that come from it. That said, the more structure you have, the less flexibility that you have at the same time. And so there's always a little bit of a give and take. And, I think there's times where that we kind of land on the other side of the line. Some of those restrictions are helpful. Some of them aren't helpful, right? And it's almost the same thing that when we kind of talk with some of our residents who are looking to go to either an accredited or a non-accredited fellowship, I think it's almost the same thing, but a little more operationalized, that the non-accredited fellowship is going to have a lot more flexibility in what you can do, but it's also going to have a lot more flexibility in what they can expect you to do in terms of work hours and travel and how many clinics you do. Whereas accredited residency comes with a lot more guidelines, a little more protection, but you're also a little bit less flexible in what you can or can't learn. So I think it's pros and cons. I don't really know a difference. I've liked it for the most part. But I'm curious your perspective, Mike.
Well, I was, as you're saying this, I was laughing about my first. So when I started, I think your answer is great, and ultimately I agree. There's good and bad, but I've seen both. And so when I first started the residency, you have a graduate medical education committee, right? So I'm in the ACGME, and I'm getting AOA accreditation and ACGME. So I got AOA first, and so I'm getting so I had the AOA, and then the ACGME gets inspected, and so I'm getting a re-inspection. And I'm in the inspection. During the inspection, I got to get all this paperwork. And I'm just a little kid, right? And there's this retired pediatric surgeon, and he's at the table, and he's pounding on the table. He's yelling at me. And I'm sitting there looking at this. I'm going, oh man, I'm in deep doo-doo. I don't. And he's like yelling at the top of his voice because he's explaining to me what the Graduate Medical Education Committee is, and I have no idea. None. Apparently, Michigan State, the MD school, had a graduate educational committee, which I had never been to, hadn't heard of, and so. It was like, what? So I had a lot of those moments over the years, and but I think some of the requirements, and then the hospital would take all the indirect money, and I'd get goose egg, zero. Okay, they'd pay the salary, and my program director, it was the secretary, like 0.1. So all the stuff we had to do was, all right, you go here today. What do we? I'd wake up at the first of the month and say, all right, what rotation are you on? Let's see, what does that rotation mean? Why don't we go to my office today? I mean, like literally, we had no idea, So, and I don't think that was the best way to do it. I mean, I had a lot of flexibility. But
This was back when you first started the program, right?
Yeah. And then gradually they, said, all right, you need to do about half your, about 30 your time inpatient, third outpatient, and third middle round. And so all those rules have developed on my watch, kind of. And so there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages. I think so all the things that he said, I agree with. Well, almost all.
I'll take that.
But one of the things that I think has been good is that the ACGME is now at least saying, "Hey, man, we're burning out PDs. Like we had a lot of the PIF. You know what that is? PIF, See, you don't have bullets in your head. So the program information form I had to use for about 15, 20 years. And then the ACGME would come and look at every comma, every letter, how many of this, how many of that. And so we'd spend, I'd spend weeks putting together my PIF. Then they'd come and they'd look at it and say, all right, let me see the evaluations for Joe Blow in September of 2005.
Wow.
Now, this is paper, eh? So it was really rough, So I'd have to do that. Inevitably, I'd have mistakes, right? And so they've gotten better about that. I think the lack of on-site inspections has been a huge improvement in the system.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that even post-COVID, I feel like has changed.
Exactly.
The 10-year site visit.
That's
changes
exactly what I'm
changes
talking
in Claire visit. Absolutely. I think that it helps in that you can spend more time administering your program on a day-to-day.
Yeah.
That you're not worried about, trying to make the program, make sure that you have everything that you need for a visit that's going to come a year and a half from now.
Wait,
right?
what's the main change? I'm not too familiar with the change that happened.
So there's been some changes in requirements for how often is the accrediting body for residencies going to physically come and visit your site versus allow programs to kind of report what they need to report on an annual basis, which is reviewed by the accrediting body to ensure that we're providing the environment that we claim that we are. But I think that's allowed program administrators to be more in the moment so that there's kind of a, on a healthcare side, it's the same if you're preparing for a joint commission visit, right? There's kind of the, we can be honest. There's how the hospital operates the other 11 months out of the year, and then how the hospital operates for the month that JACO's kind of getting ready to come, right? And you're kind of going through and making sure that every policy is up to date, right? That's a great way to burn out your staff for that whole month.
All the coffee pots are put away.
Yeah, exactly. You put away the coffee pots, all the blankets are put away. And so it helps you kind of move away from that to kind of more the spirit of the law, which is, are you providing a supportive learning environment that is teaching the residents the right way to practice so that they can be successful in the future?
I totally agree with that. And I think the way they look at it now, they do the residency and faculty survey. And so they'll come if they see problems, or if they have a whistleblower or somebody comes and says, hey, man, these people are not doing it right. Then they'll come and do the site visit. But right now, since COVID, they've stopped doing it. And I think it makes a lot of sense, because when they come for the site visit, they're like crossing every T, and if you're missing one evaluation and they find that, it's like a Medicare audit. And it doesn't, at the end of the day, really matter to the education of the resident if somebody didn't fill out an evaluation or something along those lines. No evaluations is brutal. But if you got 13 out of 14, is that fatal?
Another
it's a drug,
thing,
it might be, but not this. Go ahead.
Another thing that kind of changed with COVID is like virtual interviews.
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about that, Mike?
I love it. I absolutely think it's way better for many, many reasons. Okay, so, but a lot of my colleagues disagree. I don't know what you think, but I'll tell you, the evidence that we can make a big difference in person and tell it reliably. I mean, if you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's book on that, it's, talking to strangers. The evidence is we don't do so good at it. I'm pretty confident I don't do so good at it. And so to save all that travel and all the hassle of interviews, it really doesn't, I think doing it virtually saves a lot of time and a lot of money for a lot of people. And I think occasionally it's a problem. Now, what do you think? I mean, I think the students and residents have different views on it too. Go ahead. What do you think?
I never got to do a virtual interview myself. I was like beyond, I think maybe the semi-last.
You're that old?
I am. I'm pretty old. I'm almost 40 now. So thank you. I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah, I would share what Mike said. I think that virtual interviewing, has been a net positive overall. It's made things a lot more equitable. That in the past, your success was kind of based on the number of interviews you could go to, which in some way was kind of a measure of how many interviews could you afford to go to. And if you were, let's say you're a student in the Midwest who really doesn't have a geographic preference, you can travel to a lot of programs by car. But if you're trying to go to the coasts, and maintain your medical school education, you're flying. That very quickly starts to add up. So that's hotels, airfare, round trip for 8 to 12 interviews. So that can get really pricey really quick. We traded, I think, as a field that problem for a new problem, which is it's now a lot easier to go on more interviews. And so we've kind of seen that as a specialty as well, that there's now been a select number of applicants who are now going to 15 or 20 programs
Or
more for interviews, while other people are going to 4 or 5. And so it is in some ways kind of changed it from one issue to another, which depending on what type of applicant you are and which side of that scale you're on, it's either a better or a worse thing. But I do think that overall it's been a net positive. I think that now it's a little more, I don't want to say merit for application, but I think there is a little bit more, the person who's getting the 20 interviews and going to them, there's probably a reason that they've been invited to attend 20 interviews. The other thing that I would say, which I don't know, that you may think this is a little controversial, is on the applicant side, I think there was some concern of, if I don't go to the place, is it going to be a little bit easier to deceive me? From that perspective.
I agree that is a potential problem.
And so I think it is. I would also be a little controversial and say, if you were a program director who truly didn't have your best applicant's interest at heart, which I would question anybody who's a program director doing that, you can fool somebody just as easily in person as you can over interview, right? You can control
that. No, I'm kidding.
You could easily say, who do you want these people to interact with, or who do you don't want them to interact with, or what part of the hospital do you want them to see or not want to see on a physical visit. You can do the same virtually. And so I don't necessarily know that it's easier or harder to deceive somebody through one versus the other. I will also say, to try to assuage applicant concerns, it does mean no good to fool you, because if you choose to come to this program, we've got to work together as a partnership for the next 3 to 4 years, depending on whether it's an advanced or categorical program. So we're now a team. So if I convinced you to come here for a reason that isn't why you would have come here had you known the truth, we're both stuck. That doesn't help either of us. And so I would say that well-intending program directors, we have no incentive to deceive an applicant. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help them. And for somebody to go through all of the work to learn the regulations, to learn the accreditation requirements, work with the faculty to create a program, to then try to hurt an applicant, that's a lot of work to go through for somebody who's done all of this other work altruistically. So I just, I would say that to try to put that concern to bed as best we can.
Yeah, I agree. I think some people, when they go to a city, they want to get a feel for it. I mean, if you look,
for sure,
again, at data for why high schoolers pick colleges, the logic behind it is almost non-existent. Like, they go, I went there and I felt good. Like, what? I mean, it's odd, but that's what they will say. And I think the science kind of backs that up, or they'll rationalize whatever their reason is. So I think that for some people, it does harm them not to come to a place and look at it. Like, they would have a better feel, they would understand things better. And I agree with that. But for us to really try to fool them, they'd have to be pretty dumb in a way. I mean, not to be able to get online and look at what's going on. And I tell people that when they come to Lansing, we got mountains and salt water, eh? How does that work out?
Yeah, I do think you've got a point there about being able to see the city and get a feel for the city. And what I've usually started to see a lot more is in virtual interviews, that there's kind of discussion, whether it's in personal statement or otherwise, of this is somewhere that I've either visited before or families visited before. I really liked it and kind of want to come back. There does seem to be this kind of connection to places that people have visited before. So I think they're relying on some kind of experience on where they're choosing to apply an interview in light of virtual interviewing.
And when students are applying, I think the term is signaling or something.
Signaling,
and so tell us about that and the pros and cons.
You go first? You want me to go first?
Either way.
Okay. I like signaling a lot.
Same.
A ton. Okay. Now I think we picked 20 this year. That's maybe too many.
Yeah, I wasn't in favor of 20, but
I voted for 8 to 10.
Same.
Okay.
Meaning a student could
signal.
signal.
Yeah, 8 to 10. or up to 20.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I know.
Yeah.
So I think that what we're supposed to do is use it for interviews, and that's what we use it for. When we go back to do ranking, at this stage, we really don't really interview anybody who didn't signal. I mean, there's enough signals there, and we're only interviewing a little over 50 people. So that signal is a strong representation, and this year it'll be for sure. I think, when you looked at the data for some of the ortho and OB-GYN, and they had data from the other programs, the way I remember it was that, and maybe I got it wrong, but it was that the number of signals, if the signals went up, it didn't really hurt. There were some advantages to it, and not a lot of disadvantages. I think it's harder for
the student or the program?
To both,
Okay.
but to the student it was a definite advantage.
Yes.
Definite advantage. The more, and to the PDs, it makes our decision a little harder on who we have to interview. I'm being a little facetious with that, so in case you can't tell. So we have more choices, but I think our specialty now is competitive. So we're not struggling to get residents anymore.
Right.
Maybe 15 years ago it was a little different. So I think having the signal, I like it overall, and it forces the student to say, all right, this is one of my top 10 or top 20. But if somebody really wants to come to my program and I didn't make their top 20, really?
That's true.
Why?
Yeah, I think, it's probably it's kind of like the Tinder equivalent of swiping one direction versus the other, I think, in terms of programs.
What does that mean?
We'll have a side podcast about that. But I think it's about kind of showing elevated interest in a program. And I think from a program director's side, that's really what we're trying to assess when I'm reading through an application is fit. How is this resident going to fit with the team that I currently have? How is this resident going to fit career interest with the program that we have? And kind of where does this resident applicant want to go in the long term? And so I think having the signal shows kind of elevated, heightened interest in our program a priori, which I think is really helpful. That said, it's not a guarantee. And so we have people who have signaled us who we don't interview. We have had people who didn't signal us that we thought would actually be a really good fit for our program. Some of them have actually matched into our program. So, I would say for us the signaling has helped. It's not a perfect end all be all, but I think trying to expect that any one system is perfect in residency application is probably the wrong way to go about it. I think the increase to 20 makes it a little tougher because it kind of dilutes that interest a little bit. Because
Definitely.
when we were, you're signaling 5 programs or 8, you kind of know there's a really good chance that you're going to potentially match this person. When it goes to 20, that odds kind of go down, and it goes down on both sides. And so I think, one of the challenges that we've kind of had on the program director side, at least for me, I don't want to speak for Mike, is we've kind of changed a lot of things over the years in the last 5 years. And so every year kind of the number of signals has changed. We've kind of needed to react to that. There's been changes to standardized letters of evaluation. So there's been a lot of changes in the last 5 years that have kind of caused some ripples in the landscape of how do you apply to PM&R. And I think on the same side that our applicants are trying to navigate it, program directors are trying to do the same.
Yeah, I agree. There are changes. I would just say for the most part, I think most of the changes are considerably better than they were 15, 20 years ago.
For sure. Sure.
Like signaling. Now, some specialties do gold, silver, and bronze signals and that kind of stuff.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. Because right now, if it's 20, everybody puts down 20. I don't know where I fit on that. What is there, 80, a little over 80 programs or 100 programs? That's a high percentage. Yeah. So
Interesting. That's actually interesting way to do it.
So some of the specialties do they have silver and gold, or I might have made up bronze. I don't remember.
I'm sure there's a specialty considering it if they haven't actually gone to it yet.
Yeah.
Wait, wasn't there something about the standard letter of evaluation, that topic you guys wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so this is a new aspect to physiatry evaluations and applications this year. So for those that are listening to the summary, whenever it comes out, this may be something that impacts you this application cycle. So the Association of Academic Physiatrists as a group came together to try to fix one of the problems that we've seen on the application side, which is you get a lot of kind of generic letters of recommendation that are like, Joe showed up, he was on time, he was nice, he was dressed well, staff liked him. That's better than a letter that says that he showed up unkempt and staff didn't like him, but it doesn't really tell me a lot about how is this person going to fit in the program, what is their aptitude, how willing were they to take on additional patient tasks. And so this was kind of designed to be an additional evaluation tool. So the recommendation, the suggestion is that every applicant try to have at least one for the upcoming application cycle. It's not required, but it's kind of encouraged.
From another
thing.
physiatrist.
From another physiatrist. Can be either private practice, academic, any physiatrist can go in and fill out the form through the AAP. And the idea is to give a little bit more objective data on how does this potential residency applicant perform, what are their aptitudes, what level of support did they anticipate that they're going to need, and still provide some narrative comment. I think there's about a 300-word narrative that you can still provide about the applicant. But the idea is to give a lot more structure so that when you read a SLO as kind of the abbreviation, that you can get a lot more information in it than a standard letter. That's kind of the goal for it.
Yeah, so it's a SLOE, Standard Letter of Evaluation. And so so you're supposed to go through and kind of rank top 10, top half, bottom half, something like that, or top third, middle third, or bottom third, for each thing. And then they have a bunch of categories. And so people are supposed to go through and rank each student. That's how I took it. Now, I've never written one, and I've read one. And I looked at it and I go, what is this? So I didn't even know what it was when I read it. So I'm not in huge favor of it. And then I looked up some of the stats on it. And conceptually, if you have 100 students, 10% of them should be in the top 10%. Okay, then maybe another 45% should be in the top third, and 45% should be in the bottom third. That's not how it pans out when they did the stats. It still comes out biased. More than 10% of the students were in the top 10%, and more than half the students were in the top third, and not very many were in the bottom third. That's how AI gave it to me when I looked it up and tried to sort it. Did you try to do that? So
I haven't used the AI or ChatGPT on it. So
okay.
So this is kind of interesting. We're kind of two different programs with two different approaches. So
yeah.
We're trying to adopt the SLO for our students who are rotating through this year. And so we've been trying to utilize the tool. But there's programs on both sides. There's some who are adopting it. There are some who are saying this doesn't really fit into our workflow. There's a lot of challenges that come with new change. And so each program's trying to kind of feel that out. And I think that was kind of the point behind the AAP not making it a requirement for applying this year. And so there's also been a suggestion that to try and put some concerns to bed for students that if you don't have one, the point is that shouldn't be held against a student this year either. So the idea is having one should be able to provide additional information, but the absence of one shouldn't punish or penalize the student.
Is this can this replace a letter of recommendation?
Correct. So this would be in place of, so if you were rotating with me as a student for a couple of weeks, you could either ask me for a narrative letter if you wanted that, or you could ask for a standardized letter of evaluation.
Got it.
And then we could have a discussion of whether I felt like I had enough information to write a SLO on your behalf. You can also write a committee SLO. So you could have a panel SLO. So if there's multiple faculty members who worked with a student, they can come together and jointly author a standardized letter of evaluation.
Yeah.
Is it faster than writing
no way.
letter of
No, it takes
Much
more time.
longer?
I think the goal is that it takes similar amount of time. I think that because you're providing a little bit more evaluative information, it is longer. But I think the efficiency kind of comes with doing them more times. What we kind of found is there's a lot of kind of boilerplate information about like what your institution is like, what experiences do your medical students offer. And so we actually created that template information for all of our faculty. So really what we're asking the faculty is the number of different domains for function and ability. I think it's a 1 to 5 scale for, below average to exceptional on different domains. And then kind of their entrustable activities that you're going through and rating all of those things. And so that's an additional step that wasn't in the narrative letter. And then at the bottom is kind of an abbreviated narrative comment. So if you have somebody who either really excels in certain domains or really didn't excel in certain domains, I would say, you kind of have to decide, do you want to write a letter like that for a student in the first place?
Oh yeah.
But if you're going to, right, that's your opportunity to kind of say, here's explanation on these things that, or if you had a student who maybe came in initially and maybe truthfully did struggle, but was very coachable, really took feedback well, really took it and built, so that when you look at where they started their 3 or 4 week rotation to where they finished, you can comment on, this is somebody who really came a long way. They're very coachable. They're very trainable. They sought out feedback. They incorporate it. That's somebody that I really would want on my team, right? Like, so it gives you that opportunity. You can get that through a really well-written narrative letter as well. So I don't want to say that you can't get it through a well-written narrative letter. I still think that that's worth its weight. And I think it always will be.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is for that person who just kind of writes a boilerplate, 5-minute copy and paste letter of rec, that this at least should provide better information than that.
Yeah. So I think the potential is there. I just want to see the implementation. Like ER's been doing it for 3 to 4 years. I kind of looked at their
a lot longer.
A lot longer. How many years?
I mean,
Required?
it was there when I was applying, so it's at least been 10 plus years.
Okay. Well, then I want to see their data on that. I think that's at least to me, if it's useful, it's problematic. And I think then I'm going to ask you, what if you have a student who really didn't do that well, didn't learn that much, and their work habits and professionalism was mediocre or bottom third? You really going to write that?
I think that's the challenge with the slow, right? Like,
oh yeah.
And this came up at our program director conference down in Phoenix, that this was kind of a question when the slow was introduced of, I think
who's going to do that?
I was going to say, I mean, truthfully,
does the student see these?
They
you have to assume they can. They're not
I thought
supposed
they couldn't.
so students,
you have to assume they can.
So students can opt to waive their right to view it. And so if they mark on their ARS application request for the letter, they can mark that they've waived their right to view the letter, and then you mark it as such on the slow. So that's the way that you can kind of ensure that it's kind of a protected. But to your point, but I think this discussion came up that I think overall PM&R is a pretty friendly field, and I think it would be really hard to put a student on blast on a letter, right? And so I think, truthfully, when I've had situations like that, I haven't had it in a slow era. I've kind of had that tough conversation of, I'm not sure that what I saw on our time together is an accurate representation of your best abilities, and you may be better served getting a letter from somebody else. Right. And I think that kind of having that conversation, although it's really hard and it can be uncomfortable as a faculty member, I think if I were on the student side, I would much rather have a chance to redeem myself on a later rotation from somebody else.
Absolutely.
Than to get a letter that's going to bury my chances.
Oh, yeah. That's how I am. I won't write a bad letter.
I think
unless they say I really want a bad letter. They never say that.
Well, I think if I was a student who I knew wasn't very strong or didn't have a good, I would want to be able to see that letter and expect that, they're not going to write as bad of a letter if they know I can see it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But you can, as a letter writer, you can always refuse to write. So what I will, if I have, students who are not, who I'm not going to write a really strong letter for, then like somebody I might not rank. Okay, that would be where I would be that. Then I'll tell them, I go, look, my letter's not going to be that strong, or it's going to be really bad. And then I'll say, you sure you want me to write that letter? Or there's going to be a lot of weaknesses there. And that's, probably happens about every other year to me. So it's pretty uncommon.
So basically, but as a program director, you can see that they didn't waive it.
Well, but
no?
You can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you could see that. But the point is that they're going to go to interviews and people will comment on their letters. And they'll comment right to them. And they'll say, oh, yeah, Andary wrote you a really lousy letter.
Yeah, I was going to say.
That doesn't go well.
Yeah, you could always kind of hear through passing the contents of your letter.
Right.
But being able to specifically view it, that would
breach. You're not supposed to do that. But that some students get into their ARIS file where they can get a copy of it.
I didn't know that.
You never heard of anybody who did that, huh?
No. Except myself. I'm kidding. I didn't do it. I didn't know you could. I felt like it's all locked and secure.
You're not
But somebody will show it to them.
You're not supposed to be
somebody
able
will
to.
show it to them.
Yes, like some coordinator.
It's not
from
that they
somewhere.
went
Yeah.
in. They're like, somebody
Yeah.
should. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it true that there's a program director chat group? Like cell phone chat group. Are you not?
I'm not in on it.
You're not. Or is it,
No, but there's program director.
I only asked because I was curious
Email.
what the hottest topic was.
We can't speak about it.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
No, I would say there's an email listserv. I think that's kind of the most common way that we all kind of communicate, and I think that's been a nice way to kind of pose a question of, sometimes if you're in hey, is this like a real thing? Does anybody else deal with this? Or my chairperson told me X. Has anybody else been told this? It's a really great place for people to either chime in and say, yep, we had the same thing, or no, that's a you problem. But that's, I think, kind of been the most common ways through the AAP's listserv for us.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
That's pretty cool. Do you ever go as a program director here? Because the burnout is so high. You go to a program director over here, like a different program, but you lateral transfer. Is that a thing?
Oh yeah. I mean, does program directors switch?
Yeah, to
Switch
another
programs?
program director.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they do?
I haven't done that, but yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I've been offered other PD spots.
it comes up. I mean, it's
It's not real common.
yeah. I think one too that often comes up is either for potentially new programs who are looking to get started.
That makes sense.
I think that trying to have somebody who already comes from an established program with kind of an understanding of all of the ACGME requirements and what it takes, that's a lot easier to kind of plug and play somebody in. So those typically come up, and then some of the others are either for, division chief, vice chair of education position. That's kind of, I think, another natural extension role for those with kind of long-term educational experience.
I'd agree. Yes, usually a stepping stone, or somebody will say, "Hey, I want to move down to Florida" or something like that, and then they'll start a new program or something down there.
Mm-hmm.
What are some general ways that you guys deal with real problematic residents who are in your program? Either a difficult situation or just ongoing poor performance. Feel free to give examples, no names. But
You can talk about me, but please delete the name. In that.
That's the hardest part of the job.
Absolutely.
Oh,
You're
really?
100%.
struggling. So, we, at least for our program, I round with the PG2s a lot. And so I know early on when they're having things that they're having issues with. Everybody has issues. So the question is what? So, and then if there's some unprofessionalism or things like that, then, we try to do an individual development plan for the resident and write it down. That probably happens about 1 out of 10 residents or less, so it's not really all that common. And then if it gets worse, then it goes to a performance improvement plan. And then it gets reported to the board after that. So once it's reported to the board, it's reportable when they move jobs and things like that. So I have not had to do that in a long time. So last time I had to do that, my resident, like I wasn't going to promote him from 2 to 3, and I was struggling. Like I was losing sleep, and I'm going to come in, and this is a long time ago. But I said to him, I'd offer you another spot. You can stay another year, and we'll work together, and I'll try to get you through the program. And he looked at me and he goes, "Well, my guru told me that you were going to do that, and I think I'm just going to step out of the program."
Wow.
I was like, "Oh my God!" I mean, it was like God, like no problem at all, because he could not pass the EMG test. And just couldn't get it. And he figured it out, and he did the right thing, and he's a doctor in another country now, and he's doing great. I hear from him all the time. Hard one is somebody who's really trying hard, who can't get it and takes time, and trying to get that time and trying to get them what they need to do, or somebody who's not getting it and isn't trying as hard as they could. Those are difficult situations. I don't have an easy. You got an easy way to tell me.
I wish. I agree 100% on the toughest scenario is the resident who's trying hard, right? It's one thing when you have a professionalism issue or a tone or communication issue or somebody who's not doing well because they're not trying hard and they're not studying, right? That's you kind of need a kick in the pants a little bit. But the resident who's trying really hard and just really isn't getting it, I think is a really challenging scenario to kind of go through as a program director. And I think it really requires a lot of thought and deep dive on, all right, let's look at how are you learning? How are you studying? How are you trying to conceptualize this topic? Because, what we've kind of seen, or at least I've seen, is that sometimes there's whether it's a learning disability or there's kind of ADHD or there's something kind of below the surface that this person has kind of achieved unbelievable things in spite of having this kind of going on. They've just kind of never been diagnosed, never been caught. So I think that's one. The other one too that you kind of see is residency's hard and life never really stops kind of during residency. And so the other one is that resident that almost kind of falls off the growth curve a little bit. They're kind of they're progressing, and then all of a sudden you just kind of see them leveling out. The performance isn't quite where you expect it to be. That's kind of that same, all right, kind of what's going on, right? Kind of have a discussion with that resident. How are they feeling? Are there things kind of going on outside of the hospital? Because I find not always, but a fair amount of the time there's something like that kind of going on. And I think kind of trying to, as best you can, create a space where somebody feels comfortable talking about that, right? We're in this really weird position too, where you're kind of both the boss, a mentor, a teacher, and an evaluator, kind of all in the same person. And so to have that person sit down with you and say, hey, like, how's your life kind of going on outside of here? It's a really delicate conversation to try and have that with your boss effectively. So I think it really requires approaching it delicately, but I think that's another one of those kind of, it comes with time, program director skills and experiences, right? And I think, I haven't been doing this, anywhere close as long as Mike, and I feel like the first times I approach that to the times I approach it now, like I think you get better every time. But I think that,
I'm not so sure.
At least I would like to think, but I think it's really, you got to know your team, and you have to know the residents that are a part of your program so that you can kind of, kind of the lifeguard. You're trying to keep an eye on the whole pool and see who may need a little bit more help or who's kind of, going out towards the deep end that you need to keep a little bit closer eye on.
Yeah. Is that a main reason for PD burnout, or is there some other big reason?
Oh, yeah. I would say.
Yeah.
So part of my role at MSU was to help handle problem residents from other programs. So they had a hearing committee, right? So, psychiatric and psychological problems. So we had a really smart resident. I'll say it was an internal medicine resident, may or may not have been, who was not handling patient care well, very high IQ, very smart, but psychiatrically unstable, and was being, accusing people of picking on him for multiple reasons. And so then we had to go through like a hearing, right? And they had 3 other PDs, program directors, and then that resident, and the resident had a lawyer, and all, it was, so I've had several of those hearings and stuff. And so one thing that the PD that I saw that was critical was that the PD start listening, documenting possible problems, not problems, possible problems in the semi-annual review early on, and say, look, this is a pattern of behavior that instead of the person, like I was trying to defend the program director because the resident wasn't doing right, but I had perfect, worthless. I was like, whoa. Yep. Like, when did he go off the rails? And, well, he was off the rails before, but there was no one had really written it down.
The documentation wasn't there.
Right. And it looked, so it was really, eventually the resident did not graduate because he cracked up and did some more bad things.
We talk a lot about residency burnout, physician burnout, but we never talk about PD burnout. But if the lifespan is like, we do, you guys are here. But if you think about the lifespan being 5 to 6 years, that's some serious burnout we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think I think part of it is, it's not that every program director is leaving after 5 or 6 years. And it's also not that every program director is leaving for reasons that they didn't like the job, right? Part of it may be promotion, it may be lateral movement to another program. That's just how long is that program director at that program. I think it's still worth talking about because, everything that we do on a residency cycle is a cycle. So if you've been a program director for 1 year, you've done kind of every aspect of program administration exactly once. You went through one application review cycle. You went through one interview season. You went through one rank list. You went through one annual program evaluation, one annual update, one survey, and so you need.
But you still haven't graduated one resident from beginning to end.
Correct, right? So it takes 3 years at a minimum to graduate a resident, and it takes really 4 or 5 years to graduate a resident that you interviewed in that role. And so it almost takes the average life cycle to get one resident that you interviewed all the way through. And so I think that there is a lot of things that, both our academy and our organization are doing to try to help this, especially on the PM&R side, because I think having more longevity in program directorship is important for kind of stability of programs long term, right? There's a reason that Mike's program has had the success that it's had. A lot of it is because of the person sitting in front of you today. But I think a lot of it too is that he's been at the wheel for a long time, and he's been able to steer the program, navigate through a lot of changes. And he's been able to do that without needing to relearn the job. And I think that takes a lot of time. And that was even something when I was associate director. It took me a long time to learn the associate director job. I thought I had a pretty good handle on what I was walking into as program director. Turned out there's still even more that you don't know when you take that role. And so you spend a lot of time just trying to figure out how do you do the job. And then you spend a lot of time doing the job. So I think that being in the role, being in the seat for longer, I do think makes you a better program director.
Yeah. I can do some things in 5 minutes that you can't do yet. No offense.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So you go, well, this is how I'm going to do it. And then I just live with it. So, whereas other people are like, what are we going to do? Like slows. Like, I'm not doing them this year.
See, I'll teach you that one.
That took 5 seconds.
No.
Right. Wait, let me see. I mean, I did look it up, and I'm interested in it. And I think if we really do that, I think it'll be helpful. But I don't see it.
You'll give it some time.
Right. Well, I'll be the APD when it comes.
Yeah,
That's true.
fair.
Well, this has been, I think, a fantastic discussion. Appreciate the experience you guys have. Any last comments you want to throw out to people listening who are or may want to be a program director?
Oh, I think I'll take that first because this was one I was kind of thinking on the drive in this morning about. Is I think if you're interested in it, I think first of all, I think there's a realization that academic medicine is beyond teaching. That's a big part of what we do is teaching residents and medical students, but there's aspects of research mentorship, curriculum development. There's a lot of those types of things. And I think, one of the discussions I think a lot of program directors have is, we're never having a discussion of, I wish my faculty could be less engaged, or I wish I had less people who wanted to help with things, right? So if you want to participate or you have a mind for being a program director or associate director down the road, I think get involved. Talk with your local program director at your own department, your own division, or if you're a physiatrist in an area, maybe your group doesn't have a residency program, but there's a program in your city. Reach out, kind of see if there's ways that you can get involved and kind of get involved in some of the process. Is there something that you've been wanting to do in didactics? I think both of us probably have long lists of these are things I wish I could do, right? And if somebody comes in and their wish is kind of already on that list, or maybe it's not, but it's a great one, it's really easy to kind of give that to somebody who's willing and wanting to participate and engage. And so I think first thing is be present, be wanting to participate, reach out, and just kind of be a part of it. We're all educators at the end of the day. And so even if you come in as a early career faculty member or mid-career or wherever, and you don't have a lot of experience in it, we like to teach. So we're happy to kind of teach you some of the faculty curriculum stuff as well, because that's going to help our programs in the long run.
Yeah. So I think you're getting involved. If you want to be the PD or APD, kind of move up. So I don't know about you, but my guys get on the clinical or the CCC committee, clinical competency committee, come to the program evaluation, attend some of the didactics that you aren't actually teaching, okay? And then see where you are with that just from a behavioral point of view. And then from there, it'll probably go, because I don't know about what you think, but I don't think there's a huge competition to be PD.
No?
I don't think so, man.
Well, I think that getting involved
helps
get you to that, but it also helps you decide, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
Just more information.
Right. For all the ones that last 6 years, there's probably 28 who said,
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I really like it, but I think not everybody does.
Yeah, it takes the right kind of person, kind of the right mentality, and I think the person who wants to have that variation in their day, right? So I think if you're somebody who says, I want to be a program director, but I really want to be, predominantly clinical, 80, 90+% clinical, right? If that's what you kind of view for your future practice, then maybe think about being core faculty for a residency program. You're still going to have a very inner circle role in curriculum development, curriculum management, assessment, et cetera. But I think that the program director role is, for me, one of the most important things that I do in some ways is outside of the clinic. Not every day. Sometimes my most important thing I do is in the clinic. But, you're going to spend a significant amount of your day professionally outside of seeing patients. And so just at a base level, is that something that you're going to be fulfilled doing? There's some people who can't imagine themselves doing anything other than seeing patients the majority of the day. There's some of us who can't imagine a career where that's what they did all day. So I think it's just trying to kind of figure that piece out too. But I think, just getting involved, trying it out, see what it's like. I think if you're core faculty or you're getting involved at a CCC level, you'll kind of decide pretty quickly if this is the thing for you or not. And then if it is, you can kind of keep diving deeper and deeper and deeper.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know we joked around, but I see you guys outside, like teaching residents and helping them out. And I see how much you guys love these residents, right? It's just like you put all your energy and effort and time into them. I'm sure there are some residents listening to this or medical students. If you could, how would you advise somebody who's a resident that's struggling, trying so hard? What would you advise them? Should they go talk to their program director? Because I'm sure that's kind of intimidating for them too.
Boy, that's a great question that I don't think has an easy answer. I think it's different from for every person. I think talking to the PD, sometimes there's some residents who don't like me that much, okay? And so it's like, okay, I'm not the best person to help you. Who can? How can you go about this? And then they can talk to that faculty or that person, and then sometimes that person will come to me, or we'll try to I'd rather work it out with them. But some of the stuff that they can't do, it's like organizing. How are you going to do it? What's the best time to do that? And then being the PD and being somebody's friend it's not, at least when I started, it was not recommended. It was recommended not to do that because it's going to be a problem. Now, that has bent a lot over the years, but it's so it can be tricky. But I think giving them the resources or giving them somebody that they can talk to about it is helpful. And for the young residents, it's almost always a senior resident, from my point of view. Almost always, that's the best way to go.
Yeah. I think, too, even taking a step back, I think if somebody's struggling, I think step one is knowing that that's okay. I think sometimes in medicine, there's this feeling that you have to be on 100%. You can never struggle. You can never fail. I think most of us have kind of made mistakes along the way. We've stumbled. We've had setbacks. We've had things that we thought were going to be, I'm never going to achieve my goals when this thing happens. Mm-hmm. We try to kind of internalize those because you don't really want to broadcast when you're not successful.
Sounds like Mike has something to share.
Dear diary.
But I think number one is just kind of recognizing that like that's part of it, right? And your program director, your department chair, your hospital president, CEO, they've probably gone through something that's as bad or worse, and they still got where they are.
We all mess up.
And so I think like number one is like wherever I'm at, like that's where I'm at. It's okay. And then I think it's finding kind of assembling your team, your battle buddies, whatever you kind of want to call it, that it's going to vary. Like for me, my moment when I really struggled, one that I remember vividly in residency, I talked with my associate director about. There were other challenges where I went to my department chair or my program director about. And so it's not always a one size fits all, but it's who's going to give me the best advice to help me with the current situation. And sometimes that's giving me advice I don't want to hear. And I kind of know that going in. I'm like, I'm probably not going to like what this person's going to say, but I need to hear it. But I think it's having people that you're comfortable going to. I think senior residents, peers are another great one. I think for anybody in training, build and maintain those relationships with the people that you're in training with, or the people that you're seeing who are going into PM&R you kind of know about virtually now that it's virtual interviewing, because like those are going to be your colleagues, and like those are also people that you can reach out to. So I think, just knowing that it's okay to struggle, but also knowing that there's help out there, and it's really hard to ask for help. But I think pretty much all of us in the field, if asked, are going to do what we can to help, because it's a small field. And if we help somebody achieve what they need to do, the field's going to be better for it.
Yeah. The harder resident that I struggle with is the one who doesn't ask for help. So they'll do something that I think wasn't the brightest thing, and I'll say, well, who told you to do that? And they don't have a name. Okay, so you didn't ask for advice. It's clearly a situation where advice could have helped you. If you'd asked me, I'd have told you not to do exactly what you did. So how do we go about this? So I think coming back then, and I think one of the things for faculty development, one of the things that I know this now better than you, because I've had residents from 20 years ago. One just texted me a few weeks ago and said, one of the things that I liked about me, which wasn't much, was that when I didn't know something, I would say it. And he goes, so many people wouldn't say they didn't know, and I would say, I don't know. And that he goes back and looks and he says, that was one of the major things that I liked you. And he would, so, and I've had numerous people telling me, now when you're really dumb and you don't know much, then it's easy to do.
That's not true.
But I think, and when you look at faculty development, one of the things with faculty development that they're really trying to push us to do is when you don't know, or when you make a mistake with a resident and a patient, is to look at the resident and say, this was a mistake. So that they know that we make mistakes, and we acknowledge it at the time, and we try to fix it. That's out of all the faculty development that I've gotten recently, that was the one that hit me the most. But I had old like some of my first residents, I didn't know what I was doing, and they would say, they appreciated that. So I
love that.
Doctors don't like to say that.
No, absolutely.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
But I think now I'm especially old, and I don't feel insecure that much. So I will say, I messed up on that, or I could have done it this way, or what I'll say is, there's two ways to go about this. I probably chose the wrong way, and acknowledge so that they can see where the dilemma is. Because I have some residents who are making big mistakes, and they won't say it. So. And then I'm kind of a jerk sometimes, and I'll just say, well, so you think that's the best way to do it? What about this? Which is obviously the best way, like 2 + 2 is 4, not 6.
Oh, I love it. I really appreciate you guys saying that, both of you guys, because I truly, strongly believe that vulnerability is love, right? And if we could teach the residents to be vulnerable, because like you guys said, the messing up part doesn't end as a medical student, doesn't end as a resident, doesn't end as like a junior faculty or a senior faculty or whatever, how like 30 years of being a PD, right? We all have moments of like messing up, quote unquote. And at least for a junior attending doctor, it makes me feel really safe for our seniors to acknowledge that. Yeah. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Well, we could go on and on and on with you guys, but we're not going to.
Good. Let's end it.
Really appreciate it. It's been very enlightening to me, and I hope to a lot of our listeners too. Thanks, guys.
This has been The Summary, a podcast brought to you by Mary Free Bed, hosted by Dr. Una Sinsky and Dr. Doug Henry. Like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.